To walk alone is not merely a physical state, but a profound psychological and symbolic reality. When a woman chooses to walk alone without the validation of a man or the structures that society so often prescribes, she is not simply isolated. She is standing at the threshold of individuation. Carl Jung saw solitude not as emptiness, but as a crucible where the unconscious can rise, where the true self demands to be met without distraction. A woman who walks alone confronts her shadow more directly, engages her inner archetypes with greater intensity, and begins to embody her wholeness in ways that transcend conventional roles. In this lecture, we will explore the deeper meaning of feminine independence, the archetype of the lone woman as both feared and revered throughout history, and how this solitary path becomes a symbol of transformation, courage, and the pursuit of authenticity. The archetypal meaning of the solitary woman has echoed through myths, legends, and cultural narratives across centuries, often carrying with it both awe and fear. From a Jungian perspective, archetypes are universal patterns embedded in the collective unconscious, shaping human behavior and perception regardless of time or place. The image of the woman who walks alone, untethered to a man, is one of those archetypes. She stands as an embodiment of independence, transformation, and confrontation with the unconscious beyond the confines of societal expectations. She represents not simply an individual woman making her way without companionship, but a timeless symbol of feminine autonomy, a figure who disrupts conventions and embodies the difficult yet transformative path of individuation. To understand her is to understand not only the psychology of women, but also the collective psyche's response to the feminine principle in its most independent form. Throughout history, cultures have both revered and demonized women who walk alone. Ancient myths often portrayed solitary women as priestesses, witches, healers, or outcasts. Figures who operated on the margins of society, feared for their power, yet secretly respected for their wisdom. The solitary woman archetype carries this duality. She is dangerous because she resists being controlled, but she is also necessary because she holds knowledge that arises only from independence. In Jungian terms, she embodies the tension of opposites, the clash between societal order and the unconscious call toward individuality. This archetypal polarity reflects humanity's ambivalence toward the feminine. When it is not contained within marriage, family, or prescribed roles, to walk alone is to step outside of collective norms, and this act alone transforms the woman into a carrier of symbolic weight, whether she desires it or not. Jung observed that archetypes often emerge in dreams, myths, and cultural symbols, not as literal truths, but as psychological realities. The solitary woman archetype expresses the unconscious recognition that independence is not only possible, but necessary for transformation. Aloneness symbolizes separation from the collective and initiation into the deeper layers of the psyche. Just as the hero archetype must leave home and face trials alone to achieve growth, so too does the archetype of the solitary woman express the heroism of feminine individuation. She is not defined by her relationship to a man, nor by her role within a household. Instead, she is defined by her inner journey, her capacity to withstand solitude, and her openness to the unconscious. This shift marks her as a figure of transformation, embodying the psychic courage required to move beyond what is socially safe into what is psychologically necessary. In many cultures, the solitary woman archetype is feared precisely because she embodies autonomy. To walk alone is to be uncontrollable, and societies often mistrust that which they cannot contain. The witch trials of Europe are an example of this projection. Countless women were condemned not because they committed crimes, but because they lived outside the expectations of marriage, family, and obedience. The archetype of the solitary woman was projected onto them, and the collective unconscious, unable to tolerate such independence, demonized it. Jung would argue that this fear reflects not only social prejudice, but also a deeper anxiety in the collective psyche. The solitary woman forces the confrontation with the feminine as autonomous, with the anima as a force not bound to patriarchal structures. She exposes the collective shadow, the fear of freedom, the fear of feminine strength, and the fear of what lies beyond the safety of convention. At the same time, the solitary woman has been revered in spiritual traditions. Mystical women, saints, and hermits often embody the archetype in its sacred form. They withdraw from companionship not out of a rejection, but out of devotion to an inner calling, a confrontation with God, the self, or the unconscious. In these cases, solitude is not emptiness, but fullness, an immersion in symbolic depth that cannot be achieved in the noise of social life. Jung might interpret these women as expressions of the self archetype manifesting through feminine form, guiding them toward individuation by means of solitude. Their walking alone becomes a sacred journey, a necessary detachment from collective definitions to encounter the divine within. In this way, the solitary woman archetype holds both danger and sanctity, reflecting the paradoxical nature of the unconscious itself. On the personal level, when a woman walks alone, she is enacting this archetype, whether consciously or unconsciously. Her choice to detach from external validation, especially that which is tied to men, is symbolic of a deeper psychic process. It is a refusal to project her inner animus onto an external partner, and a willingness instead to engage with it directly within herself. Jung described the animus as the inner masculine dimension of the female psyche, often projected onto men, but ultimately meant to be integrated. When a woman walks alone, she is no longer bound by this projection. She encounters her animus as an inner reality, allowing her to claim its strength, rationality, and authority for herself. This confrontation is transformative, for it liberates her from dependency and integrates her inner world, moving her closer to wholeness. The solitary woman archetype also represents confrontation with the shadow. To walk alone is to meet the parts of oneself that are uncomfortable, frightening, or suppressed. Without the distraction of companionship, she is forced to confront the aspects of her psyche that others might buffer or hide. Loneliness can give rise to fear, insecurity, or doubt, but it also creates the space for these shadows to emerge and be integrated. Jung emphasized that the shadow, though difficult, is essential for individuation. The solitary woman becomes a mirror of this process. Her aloneness brings her face to face with darkness. But in doing so, She gains authenticity and depth that cannot be achieved otherwise. This makes her archetype a figure not only of independence but of courage, for she demonstrates the willingness to face the unconscious without flinching. Archetypally, the solitary woman is transformative because she embodies liminality. She stands between categories, neither defined by relationship nor absorbed by collectivity. This liminal position allows her to channel archetypal power in ways that those within societal roles cannot. She is a threshold figure, both inside and outside, belonging and not belonging, a symbol of transition. Jung's fascination with alchemy resonates here, for the solitary woman represents the prima materia, the raw material of transformation. Her solitude is the crucible in which psychic transformation takes place, burning away superficial identities to reveal the gold of the self. In this sense, she is not only an individual, but a symbol of the universal process of transformation, embodying the collective human journey toward individuation. Cultural images reinforce this archetypal meaning. In literature, the solitary woman appears as the mysterious wanderer, the wise healer, or the feared outsider. In mythology, she is the goddess who refuses marriage, the huntress who roams free, the crone who lives on the edge of the village. These images persist because they touch something deep in the collective psyche, the recognition that independence, though threatening to order, is essential for transformation. Jung would interpret their persistence as evidence of archetypal truth, a pattern that cannot be erased because it speaks to the fundamental dynamics of the psyche. Whenever a woman today chooses solitude, she is unconsciously activating this archetype, resonating with centuries of symbolic imagery, whether she knows it or not. It is important to note that the solitary woman is not necessarily without relationships, but her essence lies in not being defined by them. She may love, she may connect, but her identity does not dissolve into another's. Her walking alone symbolizes a psychological stance rather than a literal state. It is the willingness to stand apart, to define oneself from within rather than from without. This is what makes her archetypally powerful. She disrupts the projection of feminine identity as passive, dependent, or secondary, and asserts instead a feminine principle that is autonomous, active, and self-possessed. For Jung, this archetype represents a necessary counterbalance in the collective psyche, a reminder that the feminine contains not only nurturing, but also independence, not only relation, but also sovereignty. In the modern world, the archetype of the solitary woman continues to provoke strong reactions. Some celebrate it as empowerment, a breaking of chains, while others still view it with suspicion or disdain. This polarization reflects the archetypal charge of the image. It is not neutral, but electrified with meaning. To walk alone is to embody transformation, and transformation is always disruptive. The solitary woman archetype forces both the individual and the collective to confront the unconscious, to recognize what has been repressed, and to integrate what has been denied. In doing so, she becomes not just a personal figure, but a cultural symbol, a reminder of the power and necessity of independence in the journey toward authenticity. The psychological journey of a woman walking alone begins with a confrontation against deeply embedded cultural expectations and internalized beliefs. Society has long measured the worth of women in relation to others. Her role as a wife, a mother, a companion, or a supporter of a man's ambitions. To step outside of that framework is not only an external act of independence, but also an inner revolution. From a Jungian perspective, this journey is not simply about separation from external relationships, but about the individuation process, the unfolding of the true self by integrating unconscious material into conscious awareness. When a woman chooses to walk alone, she is not merely refusing external dependence. She is engaging in a psychological journey that requires her to face the depths of her own unconscious, to meet her shadow, to integrate her animus, and to move steadily toward wholeness. Walking alone brings her into unavoidable contact with her shadow. The shadow, in Jung's framework, represents all that the ego rejects or denies, the parts of the self that are buried because they are uncomfortable, unacceptable, or frightening. In the context of women, the shadow often includes anger, ambition, independence, or sexuality, qualities that have been historically suppressed by social conditioning. When a woman walks without external validation, without the buffer of being someone's partner, these shadow elements emerge with greater clarity. She may feel sudden bouts of loneliness, fear, or even resentment, not because solitude is inherently negative, but because it uncovers what has been hidden. To walk alone is to strip away the distractions and confront the raw presence of one's denied aspects. The journey requires courage, for the shadow is not easily accepted, but integration of it is essential for individuation. By facing her shadow, the woman begins to reclaim her full humanity, accepting not only her light, but her darkness, not only what is approved, but what is authentic. Equally important in this journey is the integration of the animus. Jung described the animus as the inner masculine counterpart in the female psyche, just as the anima is the inner feminine counterpart in the male psyche. The animus often appears in dreams and fantasies as figures of authority, critics, or guides, and when unintegrated, it tends to be projected outward onto men, shaping relationships in ways that may limit the woman's autonomy. Walking alone interrupts this pattern. Without leaning on external men for validation, protection, or identity, the woman must engage directly with her animus as an inner reality. She confronts its critical voices, its authoritarian tendencies, but also its strengths, its rationality, courage, and capacity for action. By integrating the animus, she claims these qualities as her own rather than seeking them outside herself. The journey thus transforms her relationship with masculinity, no longer dependent on projection, but rooted in inner wholeness. This process of animus integration is often tumultuous. At first, the animus may appear as a harsh critic, undermining her choices with internalized voices of authority. These voices may echo societal judgments that label her independence as selfish, unnatural, or dangerous. Yet by engaging with the animus consciously, by dialoguing with it through active imagination or reflection, she begins to discern its deeper wisdom. The animus is not inherently destructive. It becomes destructive only when denied or projected. When integrated, it empowers her with clarity, assertiveness, and creative energy. Jung saw the integration of the contrasexual archetype as crucial for individuation, for only by uniting the opposites within, masculine and feminine, rational and intuitive, can a person become whole. A woman walking alone enacts this integration directly, taking back the power of the animus to strengthen her psyche rather than dominate it from the shadows. The journey toward individuation also requires confronting the collective unconscious and its archetypal patterns. A woman walking alone inevitably stirs projections from others. She may be seen as threatening, pitiful, or admirable, depending on the observer's own unconscious material. These projections are not truly about her, but about what she represents archetypally. Some will project the witch, fearing her independence. Others will project the muse, romanticizing her solitude. Still others may project the outcast, pitying her for what they perceive as lack. To navigate this landscape requires psychological strength, for she must differentiate between who she truly is and the images others cast upon her. Jung emphasized that individuation involves withdrawing projections, both one's own and those of others. For the solitary woman, this means continually reclaiming her identity from archetypal distortions, standing firm in her authenticity, even when misunderstood. Dreams often play a central role in this psychological journey. A woman walking alone may find her dreams populated with figures representing her shadow, her animus, or archetypal symbols guiding her transformation. Dreams of wandering, of being pursued, or of finding hidden places often symbolize the psyche's attempt to orient her in this new state of independence. Dreams of masculine figures may reveal the current state of her relationship with the animus, whether he appears as tyrant, lover, teacher, or ally. By recording and working with these dreams, she participates in an ongoing dialogue with her unconscious, allowing it to shape her journey with symbolic guidance. Jung described dreams as compensatory, balancing the conscious attitude with unconscious truths. For the solitary woman, dreams provide the map for navigating the psychological terrain of independence. Solitude itself acts as a mirror. Without the noise of relationships or societal approval, a woman begins to hear her inner voice more clearly. At first, this may feel overwhelming, for it brings into awareness not only inspiration, but also unresolved pain, trauma, and longing. Yet through this confrontation, healing becomes possible. Jung often spoke of the need to turn inward, to descend into the depths of the psyche, even if it meant encountering darkness. Solitude provides the necessary container for this descent, creating the silence in which the unconscious can emerge. A woman walking alone learns to tolerate this silence, to endure the discomfort of being with herself. And in doing so, she grows in self-knowledge. The journey is not about rejecting connection, about building a foundation strong enough to enter relationships without losing oneself. The confrontation with loneliness is one of the most difficult aspects of this path. Loneliness is not simply the absence of others, but the confrontation with the self in its rawest form. Many fear this confrontation, seeking to fill it with distractions or external attachments. But the woman walking alone must face it directly. In Jungian terms, loneliness is the experience of the ego realizing its separation from the self, the archetype of wholeness. It is painful, but it is also the beginning of reunion by enduring loneliness. By staying present with the emptiness, she creates space for the self to emerge. The journey becomes one of transforming loneliness into solitude, a shift from deprivation to fullness. Solitude, unlike loneliness, is chosen and embraced, and it allows the deeper layers of the psyche to reveal themselves. As the woman progresses, she begins to embody individuation more fully. Individuation for Jung is the process of becoming who one truly is beyond masks, projections, and collective roles. For a woman walking alone, individuation means shedding the identities imposed by society, caretaker, companion, subordinate, and embracing her unique essence. It is not an act of rejection, but of integration, for she does not deny her capacity for relationship or nurturing. She simply refuses to be defined by them alone. Individuation involves integrating opposites, masculine and feminine, light and shadow, conscious and unconscious. Her solitude provides the crucible for this integration as she continually meets the parts of herself she once denied and welcomes them into wholeness. The psychological journey also has collective implications. A woman walking alone does not only transform herself, she also challenges the collective psyche by embodying an alternative model of femininity. Jung understood that individual transformation contributes to collective transformation, for the psyche is both personal and collective. When a woman integrates her shadow, her animus, and moves toward individuation, she offers a living image of wholeness that resonates in the collective unconscious. Others may resist project or fear her, but unconsciously they are influenced by her presence. She becomes an agent of change, not by seeking to reform society directly, but by embodying authenticity. The collective archetype of the feminine shifts subtly through her example, expanding the possibilities for other women and for humanity as a whole. The journey of walking alone is therefore both inner and outer, both personal and archetypal. It requires facing the shadow, integrating the animus, navigating projections, and enduring loneliness, all in the service of individuation. It is not a path of isolation, but of transformation, for through solitude she comes into deeper relationship with herself and, paradoxically, with the whole of humanity. By refusing to be defined by external validation, she discovers the inexhaustible depths of her own psyche. By engaging with her unconscious, she participates in the timeless process of individuation, the unfolding of the self. The psychological journey of the woman walking alone is thus not an escape from life, but an immersion into its deepest layers, a courageous confrontation with what it means to be whole. How solitude empowers feminine strength, creativity, and authenticity can be understood only when we view solitude not as a deficiency, but as a potent psychological space where the unconscious and conscious can meet without interference. In Jungian psychology, solitude is not simply being without others. It is a container for transformation, a crucible where the psyche confronts itself. For a woman, especially in societies that define her primarily by relationships, solitude can become revolutionary. It allows her to encounter her own depths, to hear her inner voice, unmediated by external demands, and to bring forth strengths and creative expressions that are uniquely her own. This empowerment is not given from outside. It arises from within, from the dialogue with the unconscious that solitude makes possible, and it enables her to live with authenticity rather than conformity. The first aspect of empowerment, though, through solitude, is the cultivation of inner strength. Strength here is not simply endurance or resilience in the face of hardship, though it includes these qualities. It is the strength that comes from self-knowledge, from facing the parts of the psyche that are often obscured in the noise of relationship and society. Alone, a woman encounters her fears, her doubts, her wounds, and her longings without the buffer of distraction. This confrontation may be painful, but it is also transformative. Jung emphasized that the shadow, the hidden, rejected aspects of the self must be faced and integrated if wholeness is to be achieved. In solitude, the shadow comes forward clearly, and by engaging with it, the woman gains strength that is not superficial but rooted in authenticity. This inner strength allows her to stand firm in her identity, to make choices aligned with her deeper self, and to navigate the world without collapsing under external pressure. Solitude also unlocks creativity, for it opens the door to the unconscious, the wellspring of symbols, images, and archetypal energies. Creative expression is one of the ways the unconscious communicates with consciousness, and without solitude, these communications are easily drowned out. A woman walking alone finds herself more receptive to the stirrings of imagination, to dreams that linger at dawn, to visions that surface when silence reigns. Jung himself experienced this creative dialogue through his own active imagination, producing symbolic art and writings that revealed the workings of his psyche. For a woman, solitude provides the same opportunity to give form to inner material through painting, writing, movement, or other creative channels. This creativity is not for external validation, but for self-expression and integration. It becomes a way of making the unconscious visible, of shaping personal myth, and of embodying the archetypal energies that move within her. The authenticity of such creativity is its power. It arises not from imitation or performance, but from the deepest layers of her psyche. Authenticity is perhaps the most profound gift of solitude. To live authentically means to live in alignment with the self, the central archetype of wholeness in Jungian psychology. The self is not the ego, it is the totality of the psyche, conscious and unconscious, and it seeks integration. Solitude creates the conditions for hearing the self's voice, for attending to the subtle guidance that emerges in dreams, synchronicities, and intuitions. In solitude, a woman begins to differentiate between the voices of the collective, what society says she should be, and the voice of her own inner truth. This differentiation is essential for individuation, the process of becoming the person she was meant to be rather than the person others expect. By choosing solitude, she affirms her commitment to authenticity, even when it means disappointing expectations or standing apart. This authenticity becomes visible in the way she speaks, creates, and acts. And it carries an authority that comes only from being rooted in the self. Solitude also empowers by breaking dependency on external validation. In many cultures, women are conditioned to measure themselves by approval from men, family, or society. Walking alone interrupts this pattern. Without immediate mirrors reflecting back her worth, the woman must discover her value within herself. This discovery is unsettling at first, for it reveals how deeply external approval has shaped her identity. Yet over time, it becomes liberating. She learns that her worth is intrinsic, not dependent on relationships or roles. This shift is a profound psychological emancipation, one that allows her to engage in relationships later, not from need, but from choice, not from dependency, but from mutuality. The strength gained in solitude thus carries forward, reshaping the quality of all her future connections. The empowerment of solitude also comes from its capacity to awaken archetypal energies that lie dormant in the collective unconscious. Figures such as the wise woman, the huntress, or the creator often emerge in the psyche when solitude is embraced. These archetypes embody qualities like wisdom, independence, focus, and generative power. A woman who spends time alone may find herself dreaming of ancient female figures, reading myths that resonate deeply, or feeling drawn to symbolic images of wilderness, water, or the moon. These are not random. They are the unconscious offering archetypal resources to support her individuation. By engaging with them consciously, through reflection, art, or ritual, she internalizes their strengths, expanding her sense of identity beyond the narrow definitions of society. The archetypal dimension of solitude thus amplifies her empowerment, connecting her to the collective heritage of feminine strength. Creativity born in solitude is not only artistic, but also existential. It extends to the creation of life itself, the shaping of a path that has no blueprint. A woman walking alone is forced to become the author of her own story, crafting meaning from her experiences rather than inheriting meaning from roles assigned by others. This act of existential creativity is itself empowering, for it affirms her capacity to define her destiny. Jung spoke of individuation as the realization of one's unique pattern, the unfolding of the innate potential embedded in the psyche. In solitude, this pattern reveals itself more clearly, for there is less interference from external scripts. The woman discovers her calling, her passions, her symbolic destiny, and she begins to weave them into a coherent life narrative. This is creativity at its highest level, the creation of a life aligned with the self. It is important to note that solitude does not isolate the woman from humanity. Rather, it deepens her connection to it. Jung observed that the more individuated a person becomes, the more they embody universal truths. A woman who walks alone may seem separate, but by engaging authentically with her unconscious, she touches archetypal layers shared by all. Her creativity, strength, and authenticity resonate with others precisely because they emerge from this universal ground. What she produces in solitude, whether art, insight, or simply the example of her life, carries collective significance. Others may recognize in her something of their own hidden potential, their own longing for authenticity. In this way, solitude empowers not only the individual woman, but also the collective, for she becomes a bearer of archetypal truth, a living symbol of feminine wholeness. The transformative power of solitude also lies in its ability to reframe vulnerability as strength. Alone, a woman may feel exposed, uncertain, or fragile, but by staying present with these feelings, she learns that vulnerability is not weakness, but openness. Jung described individuation as a process that requires surrender, as well as courage, receptivity, as well as action. Solitude teaches this balance. It strips away defenses and invites honesty, showing the woman where she is wounded, but also where she is alive. By embracing vulnerability, she finds resilience, the kind that comes not from denial, but from acceptance. This resilience empowers her to face life with authenticity, to admit her limits without shame, and to trust the unfolding of her psyche. The path of solitude is often misunderstood, especially for women, because it challenges collective norms. Yet this misunderstanding only underscores its necessity. To walk alone is to embody a counter-narrative, one that insists on the value of inner life over external conformity. From a Jungian perspective, such counter-narratives are vital for the evolution of consciousness. They disrupt stagnant patterns and introduce new possibilities into the collective. A woman who embraces solitude, therefore, serves as a cultural figure as well as a psychological one. Her authenticity challenges stereotypes. Her creativity expands definitions of femininity, and her strength models a new way of being. The empowerment she finds is personal, but it radiates outward, shifting the collective unconscious in subtle yet profound ways. Ultimately, solitude empowers because it reveals that the self is the true companion. In the quiet hours, in the moments of reflection and creativity, a woman encounters the self, the archetype of wholeness, the guiding center of the psyche. This encounter is the heart of individuation, the realization that she is not alone in a cosmic sense, but held within a deeper order of meaning. The self provides direction, assurance, and a sense of purpose that transcends societal validation. To align with the self is to live authentically, to embody strength that does not waver with opinion, and to create from a source that is inexhaustible. In solitude, the woman discovers this truth, and from it she draws empowerment that no external circumstance can take away.